Evan, Social Selling for Newbies. Brandon, Carson, good afternoon.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see you. Thank you all for being on.
Yeah.
Man, what's with our energy level today? Look at us. We're like all kind of, what is it, midweek? A lot going on?
No, mine are in reserves. I rise to the occasion. Throw me a couple questions and I'll be off to the race.
No, I think we've got to start slow, kind of stretch a little bit here and be ready to go. And welcome everybody who is on the live show. Please let us know that you're here, where you're from, if you're stretching and getting ready to go with us. We have a pretty interesting show today, kind of a topic we haven't talked a lot about, but there's a lot of talk about it. And that's forecasting and predictable revenue and how we use social for that. And so I'm really looking forward to today's call, a little bit, or conversation. It's a little bit different than what we've talked about in the past. However, before we get into that fun stuff, Brandon, first of all, who are we sponsored by this week?
We are sponsored by Modern Seller HQ. And the community's growing, which is great, getting more voices in there. And, you know, the good thing is that the topic that we're talking about today is a lot of the conversations that are taking place in the community with whether it's sales leaders or sales professionals all saying pipeline sluggish or pipeline stuck and buyers are behaving differently. What do I do? And, you know, it's our show's social selling for newbies, but it's using social as a medium to do the things that we need to do. And so that's why I think the value of Modern Seller HQ is, and all the different coaches and both of your voices in there. And so, yeah, whether you're on the podcast or on the live show, we'd love to have you at modernsellerhq.com.
Yeah.
It's free.
Free. A better deal than that.
Butter's warm.
So, Brandon, good afternoon. Jason, Dave, Stefani, welcome everybody. Now we need to go into our dad joke challenge. Who would like to start our weekly dad joke challenge?
You know, I'm getting to the point where I don't even want to show up with my dad jokes anymore. I mean, I haven't won one in weeks.
Well, it's because ChatGPT is getting smarter every day.
Well, I could have ChatGPT to give me a bad dad joke. I just haven't prompted it.
Carson, they're all bad.
You know, I think Carson, your prompt your prompt should be, give me a dad joke that's on par with what something Brandon would do. See if that would work.
Shame.
You have to give it more. You have to give it more data so it comes out with the right stuff.
Public shame. I tell you what, I'm gonna have to dive deeper into my book.
All right, Brandon, why don't you kick us off?
All right. Well, I have admittedly kind of a lame one, but I think it's a good chuckle. What's the difference between a hippo and a Zippo?
One letter.
A hippo weighs a ton and the other's a little lighter.
That's actually good. I like that one. Okay, I like that one. You may win this week.
Do you need to do another search, Carson? Do you need
No, hey, that's not fair. I think there's no need to handicap this race here. I think Brandon put a good, valiant effort forth, and I'm good with this one. So I asked ChatGPT to provide me a funny dad joke for our podcast today. Why couldn't the leopard play hide and seek?
Because he was easy to spot?
He was always spotted.
Brandon's the winner. Brandon is the winner.
I won. I was already getting sympathy votes from Butch. He said on there, let's all vote for Brandon to make him feel better.
You know you're in trouble when Butch votes for ChatGPT.
That's true. That is true. Well, what a good way to kick off. Thanks, Brandon. Brandon gave it to me too. All right.
Yeah,
love the dad jokes.
I think it's unanimous now.
Clean sweep. You crushed it. Even the Electoral College has given it to Brandon this week.
It's always a controversy there.
All right, let's move on to more fun things like predictable revenue. So what our show today is called, how do you use social selling to drive predictable revenue? And why are we doing this, right? A question, why are we talking about this? And I'm definitely interested and want everybody, Carson and Brandon, to pop in, but I'll tell you what I'm hearing like day in and day out as we talk to people is pipelines are unpredictable, forecasts are broken. We are having a really difficult time knowing what's going on. There's just a lot of general frustration. What are you guys seeing?
Go for it, Carson.
Yeah, I get the pleasure of talking to a lot of sellers and sales managers, and Tom, you hit it on the head. It's we're in a state of the business where sellers are being called upon to give a closest to the pin, and that margin of error is broader than ever, and that's challenging, especially if you're in an organization that is trying to meet budget, trying to make expectations, or reporting earnings to Wall Street. I don't care where you are. That margin of error presents a problem. All the more reason, and I know we're going to talk about this in some subsequent parts of the podcast today, but all the more reason why it's important to really control what you can and enhance the funnel in ways that you can, which social can really unlock. But right now, our buyers are in situations where, due to economic headwinds and challenges that they're having in their organizations, reorganizations, rifts that they're doing, they're not able to purchase the way that they have historically. I can't tell you how many times I talk to folks and their chief sponsor of a deal is leaving or was laid off, or perhaps there were dramatic shifts to a solution offering, thus really just fundamentally changing the whole basis for a deal. I have a friend of mine who he always jokes that for every $1 million in a deal, it's the wave of sales. There's almost catastrophic blockers that happen for every $1 million that you're trying to tack onto a deal. And it's totally true. I mean, there's so many nuances and complexities anyway in sales. And right now, all of it's turned on its head. And so it makes predicting, forecasting, makes it all the harder.
Yeah, and I would suspect with the enterprise deals that you're doing, as you said, right, as they get larger and larger, the number of complexities and number of things that can go wrong start to grow exponentially.
Well, my team's so good
Right.
that
No, I'm not talking about you. I mean, but there could be
I
other
hear
parts.
things. I
Yeah.
do hear things. I do hear
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that it gets challenging elsewhere. But in all seriousness, I've seen many, many times over the last year or so, just how just let's call it like a tectonic shift of really our entire selling foundation. It's all just being shaken apart. It's impossible to predict anything. I look at some of the account plans that our sellers did earlier in the year, and I mean they're already completely moot.
Yeah. Brandon, what are you seeing and hearing?
No. Yeah, I mean, I think I could just echo it, and we can probably move on. But I'm curious what everybody on the comments, what their opinions are on this too. I want to make sure that we're not just in an echo chamber, and in the things that we hear, or can be the things we want to hear, or we keep looking for them because we've been hearing it. I'm really curious with other people. But a lot of the conversation we have, yeah, that's unpredictability is probably the biggest word. Frustration is a big word that we hear a lot. And when you can't trust your forecast model, it makes it really, really difficult to make decisions. And where's the answers? What's the answers? With so much volatility going on in the economy, so much uncertainty going on in the economy, as Carson said, you're dealing with buyers who all of a sudden your champion's gone, or budget's been changed. Frustrating times, that's for sure. But we always know with challenging times, there are opportunities. And as the three of us talk about, now's a really good time to invest in social. And it's not, I almost wore my social selling suck shirt just for today, just to make that point that this isn't about social media. No, this is strategically using social to unstick pipeline and create more predictable flow and be able to have confidence in your forecast. So I'm really excited to talk about today. And I think this conversation is going to go to 2 or 3 more episodes. We won't get it all done in one day.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing, and also interested in what everybody out there is seeing as well, is what I'm seeing from a sales management perspective is the way to address the unpredictability. There comes into 2 things. We have to replace the people, right? We don't have the right people, or how do you pedal faster? And and I think this is what we're going to talk about today. What I see is that not only are you dealing with some of the volatility that we've just talked about, but you're also dealing with what we keep talking about as the changing buyer. And even if I could get away with sort of the old school techniques of sales before, when everything was, there was plenty of things, I have to be on my game even at another level as it relates to the buyer. And a lot of times that we don't hear that. We hear, well, it must be my sales team that's not good, or I've got to go hire somebody else, or, they're just not making enough phone calls. And really, that is not really the right solution to it either. It's also looking at the world that we're in today and the buyer that we're dealing with, the buyer that we're doing. So
Yeah.
we're obviously going to hit on that as well.
Yeah. And again, I'd love to hear from people in the comments, like, really, what are you dealing with and what are you doing? Because it's what Tom was just saying there. It's make more calls, or let's change the script, or let's change the email. Let's work on the subject lines. And I think those are all the same motions that teams have been doing for the last 3 or so years. And you got to get to a point at some point where you go, is a change subject line really going to make a difference?
Yeah. Well, and especially if you're, again, not sort of, so let's use this to kind of start with, I think the first step is in this, our new world of predictability, right? In this new world of predictability. And that's putting the buyer at the center of the universe. And Carson, I know you've touched on this a couple of times before. Love to hear more of your specifics on this, but a lot of sales processes, if you look at it, is all seller centric, right? Did I, discovery call, demo, contract, proposal, whatever the case may be. It's all about what we're doing from the seller. But if I turn that around and look at it, what we're doing from the buyer, what is the buyer journey? What's the buyer buying process? I know you've talked a lot in the past, Carson, even about how you conducted your sales meetings to talk about how we're progressing with the buyer versus necessarily how we're doing things as the seller.
No doubt
So,
about it.
yeah.
No,
So
and there's some great comments coming through the chat too. Keep those coming. I think that'll be good fodder for our conversations. I think it's funny too. Brandon just said our next few episodes are probably going to be about this same topic. So I see him making our show predictable, ironically.
Yeah.
I see you, my friend.
Did I sense a Groundhog Day reference right there?
No. Don't get ahead of yourself with the movie references. I got a good one cooking. Go where the puck is, right? I mean, right now, and you nailed this, Tom, we got to meet people and meet customers where they are. I got a good friend of mine, Matt Barra. He always likes to say sales isn't B2B or B2C. It's P2P. It's person to person. And that's why right now we just have to be so intentional and diligent about the relationships. That's really it. More so than ever before. I think we have to exponentially increase and enhance our focus. And that's really what it's all about. I've talked many times on this show about how I gamify with my team the sales process, really intentional about the relationships that we need to create. But how much are we doing of that? Are we paying lip service to that? Are we doing it regularly, or are we just doing it once at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the fiscal?
Yes.
To be really intentional about that. We talk on this show about going out and ringing the bell. I recently went out and rung the LinkedIn bell on many, many customer pages that I follow, many, many customer executives that I follow, so that I'm notified every time they're posting, because there's no better way to know where these clients are than to listen to the words that are coming directly from their keystrokes. So be intentional about this. During times like this is where heroes are born. Listen to what your leaders are saying. And they are saying exactly that. They're saying we need more pipeline. We need more consistency and predictability in pipeline. And so, I've talked on this show before, my social selling machine was something that I built during a time where leaders were saying we needed more pipe and we needed more line of business relationships. So be very consistent about that. We at Microsoft, we work with a sales cycle and a structure, and there's different resources that engage at different levels. But I think thematically, it's very similar. If I go out and I create a relationship, have a conversation with an executive today, I might walk out with 3, 4 opportunities, and those can go into my CRM, and I can manage those at a different stage, right? I can look and go down my list every day. I can brief my team on these opportunities, make sure the right people are engaged, and then when we do our cadences and our weekly get together, weekly roundtable, we can talk about where we were with the deal, now where we are, where are we blocked, etc. We've got to be extremely intentional about those types of things, but we've also got to be advancing and figuring out what's viable sooner rather than later. We don't have time to dilly-dally. We just have to be very intentional about each part of the cycle. One of my guys on my team this past year, he created this pipeline hack. They realized they were getting a lot of emails and influx of intel, things that they were seeing on LinkedIn, and they started putting early stage pipe in on all of this stuff. And they were, not only did they win an award for it company wide, but they also had more pipeline than everybody else, not surprisingly. So it's looking for those ways to create more so that it's in your field of vision and then it can stay top of mind. You just have to be very intentional and diligent about driving the conversations, creating and nurturing relationships, putting these things into your CRM and in your pipe, and managing them up or out.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was going to say, and what I heard you say was you have to be extreme buyer centric in everything that you do. You know, whether it's the intel that you're gathering, it's how you're talking to them. I think Rob had in here in the comments about the traditional motions are very long in the tooth and need to be modernized to meet folks where they're at. That is buyer centric selling. So if we're more buyer centric, it also means we align the way that we're selling or communicating with the way buyers actually behave, not the way we wish they would behave. And that's a difference between having a seller-focused process and a buyer-focused process. And that's a really, really hard traditional motion to break, because the traditional sales motions, we've talked about these a lot, they go all the way back into the 60s, right? I mean, Sandler started in 67, I think, and it was control, right? Everything came down to if the salesperson just does the work, then they'll be able to have the predictable outcomes. And all of that's gotten blown up because the buyers just go, I don't need to answer your call. I don't need to respond to your email. I don't need to pay attention to you. I'm going to do, we know the data, Forrester, Gartner, Accenture, whoever. I'm going to do 80% of the research on my own and keep everybody at bay. And then I will choose to talk to who I want to talk to. What that should scream to sales leaders is, how do we now position our people so that they become part of that research conversation instead of just trying to interrupt and go demo, get on a call? And I'll jump off my soapbox there for a minute.
You got a lot of energy. I mean, you started off like, and then it just went from 0 to 100.
I was holding it back. Well, honestly, this is, it is my soapbox right now, and it is frustrating. My passion, my life's mission, as I've shared before, was to create, whether it was technology and systems to help salespeople and sales leaders do their jobs easier and make more money. And I know that's a little Pollyanna in nature, but that's been my mission. And right now what I'm seeing is we're frustrating salespeople to the point where they hate their jobs. They kind of hate their lives and they're becoming miserable. And that's no way to live. And I had a conversation this morning with a sales professional in the tech space. They sell data security stuff. And he said, Brandon, I'm actually having fun with this. And I'm like, oh gosh, how dare you? Don't go tell anybody you're having fun as a sales professional. People are going to wonder what kind of drug you're on. But he's having fun because he's aligned the way that he's communicating with buyers with the way they want to do their research, instead of trying to force them to come over here, come follow my lead. Let me lead you down this path because my boss told me this is where I need to lead you. And they're having fun. That was music to my ears this morning, hearing that.
Well, and I want to, especially for people that are on the podcast that can't see all the comments here, I want to hit on some of these comments because I think there's some good ones. So Colby, I like this one. We're all throwing all kinds of spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
And can I say this for everybody too? Yeah. Colby works for Salesforce. Right. I mean, you would think, just like with you, Carson, you're with Microsoft, you pick up the phone and call somebody. They're like, oh, Microsoft, I'm going to talk to you. Oh, it's Salesforce, I'm going to talk to you.
Not like
buyers don't care.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, I would dare say that the logo on your back can hamstring you sometimes. You can get hamstrung by the logo because if somebody views you as, I know that sellers in big companies, a lot of times they'll gravitate towards certain customers at certain times. And that's actually how I really got started as a Microsoft seller was I would listen to that feedback, and I would hear customers that had, were chagrined about how we were showing up. And I would just take a very counterintuitive approach. Your investment with us is significant. I safeguard that. I'm not here to sell you anything. In fact, you're entitled to a lot of resources as a result of that. And it's my job to make sure you're privy to those. And that was how I was getting meetings at first from a social selling perspective. So it wasn't reliance on the logo. It was actually leaning in to the reasons people didn't want to talk to me because of my logo. So I think that's the key element. Hats off to everybody out there right now trying to create and build genuine relationships and fight against some of those stigmas that our customers might have.
Yeah. I'll go back to remind me what Larry Levine said last week on the show. He's like, and I'll paraphrase it, but he said, sales is at an all-time low right now from an integrity, from a personal standpoint. People don't like salespeople, and rightfully so, because the sales motions and rhythms over the last decade, we've just really pissed people off.
Yeah. Which is not really a great strategy, I would think, for a salesperson.
No, and by the way, if anyone out there, you're sending me all those LinkedIn messages telling me I have this great career and would I be interested in a alternative career in franchising, please stop, because I get I get at least 2 of those a day.
So let's hit on a couple more of these comments before we move on. Brandon, same thing, inflation, a lot of cold calls. I'm hearing a lot of the same things, not enough workers, uncertainty of cash flow, can't handle any more work. Again, same sort of rhetoric we talked about, Rob. I like Dave's comment for sure here, where the buyer is in the process versus where I am at in the selling process is gold. And I think Dave has seen that, and we know we've had some feedback from Dave. He's seen that, and probably having more fun, right? Going back to the thing about having fun versus dreading to do the next thing here. Let's see, but a lot of comments. This is great. Boy, this is a really long one from Steve. I'll try and hit on this quickly. Is totally agreed. Social selling, the next big thing. Apple Vision Pro, MR technology. Lots of concepts there that we can get into there. But yeah, I think all the technology, whether it's, AI or VR or some of the other things, all of this is continuing to lean into all the stuff that we've been talking about, which is how do we better build relationships and how do we change that?
Here's the thing that Steve hit on that I think is really important toward the end of his comment. Train our sales manager or sales department to learn and keep tracking from getting leads to interaction to close sales virtually.
Yes.
That's why social selling is so important, because it isn't all about getting leads. We've talked on this show before about the level of value of leads. I ran a call center years ago, and I mean, that was the exact science I studied was, well, this lead has a 0.01% chance of closing. This lead has a 15% chance of closing. What do you think I'm going to call and when and how? And, I think that's the key element is we've got to rely on tools like social when we don't automatically have that relationship that we inherit. When we are not warm introed into someone, there are ways that we can leverage social to go out, find our target audience, find out what they care about, show up, meet them where they are in their process, understand their process, and get introed to our influencers or their influencers with a few clicks. And that's powerful.
And I think that's a good transition. And Tom, I'm going to kind of borrow this and then tee you up to talk about it, if you don't mind. Because I think what Steve was saying there is, we've got to learn how to create these digital, and if you want to use the word funnel, we've got social over here, which historically has been seen as kind of a nice to have and kind of cute and go use it. Then we got the other end of where's the data, where's the attribution, and hardcore focused on data. The question, I believe, is there somewhere that those two can come together? And that's what we mean by predictable revenue. And where does social play into that? So, Tom, can you talk about, because you address this really well in your book on the revenue zone, Can you take it from there and make this more tactical and practical for people? So this isn't just another, oh, social's nice. Oh, we should be doing social. Everybody goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. What exactly does that mean in terms of predictable revenue?
Yeah, well, I think, and again, going back to our buyer view of the world, right? One of the things that the first question that I'll ask companies is, you take your product or service, right? And I'll ask them, I'll say, what are the three things that your buyer needs to understand about your product or service? And what are three things that your buyer needs to believe about your product or service to be in a place where they're seriously considering doing business with you? Like they're a really good, qualified opportunity that, we all have those, right? You can all think of accounts where you've got people, you've got the prospect to the point where you're just in tune, right? They totally understand what you do and they believe that you're going to provide more value than the competition. But I asked people, I said, what does it mean to have, what are the three things that your buyer needs to understand? And what are your three things, and as an and, the three things your
Mhm.
buyers need to believe to be in a place where they're seriously considering doing business with you? And Brandon, I don't know, what do we, 90% at least of the people we ask that question can't answer that. They cannot answer that question from the buyer perspective. Or what they'll try and do is change it around and talk about, well, we have all these features. No, 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 I'm not talking about your features or what you do. I'm talking about what matters to your buyer. And if you can answer those three questions, and then you can say, and then I also would say, okay, you probably have had, sales that you've made before where you've had the prospect at that level. You can probably start to look at that and say, and what was the probability of close from there? Well, we closed 50% of those. Okay, great. And then what was a time frame for close? Oh, we get those in 30 days or 45 days. So you can start to create a benchmark. It's something, right, to start creating a benchmark with. Now work backwards from there and say, okay, using content, using social, using relationships, what are the things that I need to do to get that prospect from, they don't know anything about me or know anything about my product or anything of my service, to get me to the point where they have those three understandings and those three beliefs? And you start thinking about the journey, right, that they go through here, you can start to measure that over time. You can start to measure as people progress through that journey how well they're converting to the next step in the journey, how and what probability and at what speed. And that starts to give you a buyer centric view of predictability and some analytics that you can measure against. It's very different than looking at it by saying, well, I have my sales pipeline of discovery, demo, proposal, whatever, all that, which is your view of the world. It's not, and your buyer may be, you know, step one on your buyer journey, and you think they're at step 22, and you're now out of sync. So I know that's hard to kind of articulate really clearly just verbally, but hopefully that gives some tangible things on how to kind of start looking at this.
I think that's an interesting point, and I wanted to mention too, Tom, because this is in that vein. A lot of what we're hearing from customers right now is we've got to cut costs. We're having dramatic fundamental changes in our business. We've got to cut costs. We've got to be more agile. And so that's where I think a lot of sellers are becoming stuck is, well, I can't drop my cost, or
Right.
I'm going as deep as I can to the point I'm devaluing my solution or product. And that's where we're getting stuck. A lot of this falls into the sales culture as well. I think the other piece that falls into this is, a lot of what we as sellers are doing right now is investing in the long game. If a customer can't purchase today, we have to invest in the long game, and we've got to be the trusted partner. Miguel had a great comment in here. It's not about the information that we have for our clients because they've got access to the exact same info, but really about how we can make sense of it. And in my mind, how we can tell a story, how we can articulate what we can do together, what the possibility is that we can do together based on what we've done for other clients, et cetera, so on and so forth. But the key element is there's not a lot of sales cultures. There's not a lot of sales cultures, but there's also not a lot of sales cultures that fully embrace playing the long game, because to the point that we've been making, it's all, where's the pipeline? Where's the deals? We've got to close these deals now. And that's the challenge that I think we're all up against
Yeah.
collectively.
But Carson, I have a question for you. Do you feel like if management or sales leadership had very more visibility on the longer game, like things that were progressing, hey, maybe this is next year, but I can still see that we're facilitating that customer journey. And that's something that's going to, do you think that there would be more willingness for that? Or you still think it's going to be still too short term?
Well, there's a balance. And, Colby, right there with you, my cloud friend, investing in the long game should be the mindset right now. You nailed it. But the key thing is that there's also the here and now. And we do have to have a balance of some sort. And I get it. I completely understand that, we've got to meet customers where they are. I've seen a lot of creative deal making and, doing things where we can save customers money or maybe displace other solutions that they have that we have a fit for. Maybe we're a better price, but we're also trying to earn business that has a longer sales cycle simultaneously. But the long game is the key thing right now. But you've got to find a balance of that because all sales cultures are very different. You've got some that don't understand the long game or have the mentality there is no next year or there is no next month. It's hit the number now, make the dials now. And so for some of us, it's a survival game, depending on the sales culture you're sitting in. You know how I view it? I view some sales managers as kind of like, with this computer vision, scanning these forecasts and seeing them come out awry and, kind of like the T1000 of sales managers, if you will. And they're coming along and they're really just trying to crush everything in their path. They're crunching the numbers. It's not working. So they're out there with the mind to terminate. Because right now it's an unclear picture. We want to develop this steady stream of pipeline via social selling that can not only have things that sprout in the relatively near term or in the longer term. The more time that progresses, these relationships are going to bear more and more fruit. And those are the things that you can control. But we want to also train and instill in our sales managers that culture of selling that has them saying to their teams, come with me if you want to sell.
Well done. Well done.
Very well done. I do want to bring it back to Tom, what you were saying also is if we think about where does a buyer need to be with what do they understand and what do they need to believe, and we start working backwards, it forces us to be buyer centric. And I think that's the hardest thing to crack right now is to just allow team and salespeople to be buyer centric instead of the where are they? How soon can you get them? Is it this month? Is it next month? And I think about the conversations I've had. I don't know if he's on today with Dave Lork. He talked about so often there's the end of the month is 10 days away, and what do you need to do to get them to close? And you actually ruin the relationship and you ruin the deal because you're trying to close them in 10 days. When if you were able to be a little patient, you probably could have closed them in 40 days. And it ruined the whole deal because all of a sudden you're throwing discounts, you're high pressure because all that pressure is coming down. If we can start with that buyer in mind and start working backwards, it changes the motions, it changes the approach. And I'm not advocating going slow. I'm advocating going smart. And buyers are like a skittish cat right now. And you start doing sudden movements and they take off running.
Deals are going to slip. I think that's the mentality that we have to be at. I mean, I keep going back to Colby's comment. We got to play the long game and we've got to err on the side of the customer. Deals are going to slip. But again, we always go back. What can you control? We can control the actions that we're taking every day to create and invest in customer relationships. And if you have enough conversations going, maybe our batting average is lower. Okay. So instead of, closing 2 out of every 10 deals that we put in the pipeline, maybe we're closing 1. So we need more conversations. We need more relationships. What was that Dave said earlier in the chat about the KPI, the most important KPI being conversations and relationships? And that's true. So we need to really be focused on our customer investments. How are we investing in time and face time with our customers? That's the most important thing right now. And it can't be at the point you're not going to win the crowd if you're strong arming people to close a deal because it's the end of the month. They don't care.
No, generally they don't care unless you're generally doing a giveaway program or something that's really generally not good for anybody. But back to Brandon, your point is, or what we were saying earlier, if you if you have a good knowledge of what your buyer needs to understand and what they need to believe to do business with you, you can identify that on where they are. You can then look at that and say, okay, is there something I could do to help them move that journey forward in the next 10 days? Or is that just completely absurd, right? If they're back here and they're at grade 1 and we need to get them to grade 6, in terms of knowledge and belief, trying to call more or harass more or pressure more is not going to get them to that level where they need to be willing to do business with us.
Mhm.
So, and I also do believe, all the conversation we've had here about economy and budgets and all of that, and it's all very real, but people still spend money when they have a priority, right? They still spend money when they think it's important. So part of our job in facilitating that journey is helping them to understand and believe that spending money with our product and service is a really intelligent thing to do right now, right? I mean, it's not like all spending's done. It's just a matter of reprioritizing spending. So part of our journey of facilitating the buyer journey is helping them understand that belief, right? Creating that belief that this is a smart thing to spend money on right now versus in a year that, you, for whatever reason. So
Yeah.
again, all of it, when you start looking at it from the buyer, what they understand and what they believe, it gives you tools for strategizing how you're going to move that forward.
Okay, I got something, Carson. Tell me if I'm doing good with this one. I'm thinking of the movie Apollo 13. And I really wasn't even trying. I was just, for some reason, it popped in my head. They're up in space, they've got a problem, and they put people in a room and they give them a box and they said, this is what they have. Figure out how to solve that problem. And there was one point the guy said, well, if they just had and the guy said, but they don't, right? We've got to take a look. And I like what I think Dean said, to be buyer centric, should we be asking questions and listening to hear and not just to respond? Yeah, we've got to be sitting going, okay, where are our buyers at? Right? This is what we have in front of us. How do we now help them get home? How do we get them to where we want them to be? And what we have are buyers who are limited. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're frustrated, whatever you decide that they have. And how do you now put together a plan to go to them and rescue them and bring them back home? Was that okay, Carson? Not bad.
I feel like we flip-flopped this time because you had the better dad joke, you had the better movie reference. So I feel like Admiral James Stockdale from that VP debate back in my youth when he was like, who am I? Why am I here? But I think times like this, we have to go back to fundamentals. It's so important. And wipe the decks clean. I don't care what your sales scenario is right now. Ultimately, you want to earn a relationship where you care about each other's priorities. And right now, like I said before, we've got to err so far on the side of the buyer in order to earn that trust in business. But that's okay because the pendulum always swings back and forth. There are times where they're rife with, momentum and moving forward from a sales perspective. But right now, we've got to really lean in with our buyer, understanding each other's timelines. Those types of relationships don't happen overnight. But I mean, I've had relationships, and I've talked about it on this show, where I've started the relationship on LinkedIn, saw that there was a new executive or whatever it was, met with the executive, and really just we broke bread. And over time, we understood when the key timelines were. They knew when my end of fiscal year was. I knew when their budget was due. I knew what their magical numbers that they needed to hit was. They didn't care what was in the deal that got my team paid as long as they hit this number and they had these components. Those are the types of relationships that you want and need. Those don't happen overnight. And right now, it just looks different. But if you create enough of those types of relationships, earning the right to be that trusted advisor, guess what? If there's money to be spent right now and there's creativity to have with making a deal, it's probably going to happen. Deals are still happening. Money's still being spent. It's just being spent differently and maybe less in your neck of the woods. And so just keep investing in the relationship. Keep looking for ways to create new relationships. Those are the things that really matter right now. It's the hustle stats, the stuff that doesn't necessarily show up immediately in the box score as points.
And the tactical for everybody, because I love that. Just keep being a trusted advisor, keep adding value. tactically, everybody, what does that look like? Well, we start with what Tom said. We've got to get to that end point. What do they need to understand and what do they need to believe? And then what are the components that we need to build, like a staircase? Right? They can't go from bottom floor to the top floor in one big jump. We got to get them there a step at a time. That's called doing their research. If you're the person that's providing that research for them, you give them something to consider, to think about, and it gets them to step number one. Then you give them something to think about, consider, to read, to watch, whatever, and that moves them to step number two. What's happening is when they get to the top and they're ready to start making a purchase or thinking about it, you're the one that's been walking up the stairs with them. You are a trusted advisor because you acted like a trusted advisor. That's what sales leaders need to be thinking about, how to equip their sales team, how to think that way, and then the content that allows them to do it and to drip that out over a period of time. But the good news is, like all of our other sales motions, we can start to predict based on how many people do we have at stair 0 right now, and how many overall traditionally do we get to go to step number 1, how many of those go to 2, and so on and so forth. What's our average deal size? And all of a sudden you have a predictable system. But we're not talking about cold calls, we're not talking about emails, we're talking about aligning the way that we behave with the way buyers are going to behave, whether we like it or not, so that we can go for that walk up the stairs with them.
I think that's Carson, I think Brandon doesn't really need us today.
No, I was going to say this.
It's like,
I'm going to head out.
Yeah,
Brandon, bring us home.
Hey, this is, but how do I say this? I'm not trying to, this isn't a brag. This is more of a bitch and moan in a way. I've been talking about this for 5 years, mostly being laughed at. Honestly, mostly being laughed at. I've talked about it before on stage at the Sales 2.0 conference, talking about this stuff, and people in the audience just like shaking their heads and, looking at Twitter going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was such an idiot. But the buyer behavior, what we have to understand is buyers don't really, they don't give a crap about our sales process at all. And they're empowered to just keep us out and go, go to my voicemail again. I'm going to delete your message again. Your emails are going to go into my spam folder again. I am not going to change the way that I'm doing things for you. But if you come alongside them and you help them in the process, that's when you win. But we've got to change our sales models to equip our teams to be able to do that and then enjoy the fruits of that effort.
Yeah. And if you train that person, like you said, to be that guide up the stairs as that trusted advisor, you do have to understand what turns on the customer. What do they need to understand? How do you help them understand it? How do you help them to get the beliefs? How do you help them facilitate that? A problem that frankly prospects have right now is a lack of trusted advisors. They go out into the big black world of the internet or chat GPT now, and they get lost, they get confused, and that doesn't help their progress either, right? Or they fall off the stairs that are there. So having that role as that trusted advisor not only benefits you, but it certainly benefits the customer, and more things get done in a higher thing.
Every seller that's reaching out to them right now is more and more desperate, and they reek of it because they're all under these same stresses and, everything that we've talked about thus far on the show. That's why these, I like to consider our audience noble knights of the selling game. That's why it's up to us to raise the bar, show up more informed, more buyer centric, earn that right to have the conversation and be valuable. And sometimes the greatest value that I find that I can bring customers is I know my resources so well, like the back of my hand, that I can help my customer navigate that, whether it leads to immediate revenue or not. And in fact, right now it isn't. It is it's very much earning that relationship and earning that trust, being very transparent around our processes, what I can and cannot do. But I think the more we show them behind the curtain right now, the more trust we're going to earn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and as we wrap up here, kind of going full circle on, a lot of things we talk about, if there's fewer dollars to be spent, but there is dollars to be spent, who are they going to spend them with? Somebody that pisses them off because they're harassing them and and pressuring them, or somebody who's helped and facilitated the process?
Somebody who's
Who has
climbed
the
the
better odds?
stairs with them.
Yeah.
Pardon?
If you're able to deliver wins to them and you care
Yeah.
about what is a win to them.
Micro wins along the way. Yeah. All right. So I want to hit this one from Dean as well, because I think this is, get behind the desk with the buyers and see with them as an advisor. I think that's a really good summary of everything we've kind of touched on today.
Can I throw this out? This is a little more counterintuitive, and we've seemed to be saying a lot of counterintuitive things, but those that are seeking to serve, truly seeking to serve, they're the ones that are going to win in the next 12 to 24 months, because they're going to earn the conversations. They're going to be attractive from buyers because you're genuinely seeking to serve. And it goes against the hustle culture, but we're not saying be lazy. We're saying use serving as a strategy, use authenticity as a strategy, and call it whatever you want. It's just good karma or whatever. I think, buyers are going to respond to that really, really well, because number one, they're tired of being harassed. And number two, you're going to stand out. And number three, you're going to help them. And when you help them solve problems, like going back to the stair analogy, if you're helping them walk up those stairs, showing them where, oh, be careful of this step, it's a little bit loose, come around this side so you don't trip on it, then you are their champion. You are that trusted advisor, and you're going to earn and win the deal.
Yep. And they're in the same place, right? They're having to do more with less as well. Yep. So it's a great point. So I know we're going to have, and I'm thinking Brandon and Carson, we have a lot of really good guests lined up in the queue. And a lot of the guests that I think we have coming up, I think could really add a lot more clarity even on this subject. I really think we do need to continue this whole subject of predictable revenue forecasting and how to use social and just how to become more fluent with it. And I also know, Brandon, that's obviously a huge part of the whole modern seller HQ world is how do we, help to make this transition and help people become more fluent in this role.
Yeah. And for people to know, and it's not that we sell a whole lot from here, but Modern Seller HQ is a free community where we talk about all this and we give a lot of it away for free. But Modern Seller HQ with the three of us is a place where we also can be engaged with teams to help create these processes, create these systems, train the team to be able to implement these systems. And that came about organically from the show as we were talking about this stuff. And then people came to us and like, well, how do we do this? How do I do that? How do we do this? Like, there's a huge need for Modern Seller HQ right now. And then from a sales professional standpoint, from a producer standpoint, lots of great tips and strategies in there. But from a leadership standpoint, if this sounds interesting to you, we have models, we have systems. These are things that you can put in place. But honestly, it takes a little bit of courage, because we're going to, desperate times call for desperate measures a little bit. If you want to look at it that way, you got to pull the trigger and either stay on that tightrope, frustrated. All the storms are around you. Forecasts are unpredictable. I don't even know what we have in our pipeline. Everything in our pipeline is sluggish. Or is it time to finally say, hey, we've been through this transformation stuff going on. It's time for us to take a bigger step and move in this new digital transformation era.
And have more fun.
I mean, let's go back to my conversation with Tony today. He said, man, Brandon, I'm just having so much more fun with this. It's like, yes, that's what sales should be. Sales used to be fun.
All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here today?
Just awesome comments. Thank you for the engagement today and every episode. I mean, I feel like every
great
show
comment.
we get more and more. Michelle, great to see you. Love your content. Miguel, great comments today. Thank you all.
All right. Well, Carson, I feel like I should let Brandon take us home, but
no.
So funny. I was thinking the same thing, Brandon. It's
no. I can't. No way. You, Carson. That is your baby. I had a good day today, but this is your baby.
Maybe we better let him quit while he's ahead.
Yeah.
quit while he's ahead.
It reminds me of the story when I was a kicker in college kicker, and I was a soccer player too. And they put the ball on the corner, the football in the very corner of the end zone, and said, "Could you bend it into the goalpost?" And I said, "Yeah." And I went up and I kicked it, and the first one bent right through the goalpost. And then the stupid thing that I did, they said, "Do it again." I should have walked away. I should have just walked away a winner. No, arrogance got in the way. I hit another 50 of those and didn't even come close. So I'm done. I had a good day. I'm out.
All right.
It's like that episode of Seinfeld where he's like, Costanza's got to end on a high note. It's like, all right, that's it.
All right,
okay,
Carson.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, happy social selling.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.